You are listening to an Afraid of the Dark narration. We hope you enjoy. My plane touched down after a grueling 2-hour flight from Colorado to Montana, leaving me with cramped legs, a sore back, and a numbed brain due to it being the holidays, and parents flying with their wailing infants. Nonetheless, I had reached my destination, though a long drive still awaited me as I was off to my uncle and aunt's place. After disembarking, I made my way to baggage claim, and then the car rental counter. To my surprise, I was handed the keys to a worn-out old Volkswagen Golf. In a moment of sheer stupidity, I had failed to check the fuel gauge. I realized my ill-fated choice, and found myself on a remote dirt road, flanked by ominous trees, with darkness beyond my headlights. Suddenly, the car spluttered to a halt. I pulled over. As I stood on the roadside, I glanced at my cell phone, confirming what I feared. No service. The only way this situation could deteriorate further was if some weirdo were to emerge from the bushes with a machete and force me to go along to his dark dungeon where he keeps all the missing persons. I was stranded with no options left, so I crawled into the back seat and attempted to sleep, with the hope of tackling the situation in the morning, in the heart of the Montana wilderness. Yep, I was in a whole lot of trouble. As I lay there, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, a series of concerns raced through my mind. How could I possibly fall asleep in this situation? Safety wasn't assured, not in this desolate place that couldn't even be considered a neighborhood. And to add to my woes, the cold was unrelenting. It wasn't the typical Colorado winter coldness, but it still managed to pierce through my light jacket, leaving me shivering and utterly feeble. With a sense of desperation, I inched my way to the front, hoping to find solace in the car's heater. This lousy vehicle really did live up to its reputation, as the heater proved to be as useless as the rest of it. Defeated, I retreated to the back seat, releasing a muffled torrent of curses. Oddly enough, it provided some semblance of relief. Yet, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of foolishness that had led me here in the first place. My failure to check the fuel gauge topping the list of mind-bogglingly stupid decisions. Just when I believed my evening couldn't take a darker turn, a lifeline emerged, the distant hum of a car engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. I burst out of the car with overflowing enthusiasm, practically yanking the door wide open, as if it might break its hinge under the force. The vehicle that promised to be my savior loomed just a mere 100 feet away, gradually rolling to a stop next to me, and the window glided down. Howdy. Let me guess, out of gas? The gray-haired, burly man wore a plaid shirt. His warm eyes met mine, and his amiable smile began to alleviate my anxieties about the night. Yes, sir, I replied. That's quite all right. I got plenty back at my place. He chuckled heartily. Happens to the best of us, especially those not familiar around this neck of the woods. I'd be happy to offer you a ride. This offer struck me as unusual. In Colorado, no one would typically offer a ride in the middle of the night, especially not a stranger. That would be a surefire way to encounter trouble. However, despite my reservations, I decided to accept his offer. Thank you, sir. I could have sworn I had my towing equipment, dang it. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'll drive you to my place, and we'll call road assistance. You're more than welcome to rest up at my place, till we can get your vehicle back on the road, that is. I was overwhelmed with gratitude towards this benevolent stranger, though a tinge of nervousness still lingered. This level of kindness always made me feel uneasy. No one in Colorado was ever this kind. Well, unless you knew them, of course. It was probably my city instincts acting up. Thank you for coming along when you did, sir. He returned the gesture and leaned over to open the passenger door. I climbed into the seat, shutting the door behind me, ready for this unexpected journey. The car glided forward with a gentle surge as the man firmly pressed down on the gas pedal. We traveled in silence for half an hour before he initiated conversation. So, what's the reason you're in these parts, kid? I explained how my uncle and aunt had invited me to spend a week at their home. I could help with the animals, and it was an opportunity to escape the city for a while. A smile graced the man's face. You know, kid, I've always wanted to visit the city, but I'm not so good at being away from home for too long. I nodded, appreciating his sentiment. Yet despite his cordiality, my inclination was to keep the conversation brief. Something felt off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Was it my unfamiliarity with such politeness? Or was it something more? Hey kid, would you mind grabbing some gum from the glove box? Gives me something to chew away at, since I stopped drinking. I agreed and opened the glove compartment. Although I didn't immediately spot the gum, my hand brushed against something cold and metallic. I explored further and confirmed it was a pistol. This discovery puzzled me because I didn't know anyone in Colorado who carried a firearm. My exploration continued, and my fingers finally came upon a small, foiled, rectangled tube. I retrieved it and handed it to him. "Thank you, kid," he acknowledged. Perhaps it wasn't my place to pry, but my curiosity got the better of me. "I hope you don't think I'm being rude, mister, but I felt something in there. Do you carry a firearm?" Surprisingly, the stranger didn't seem bothered by my question. "Sure do, kid. I always keep a firearm with me. Never know when you'll need it." I nodded. "It's just where I'm from. Almost no one carries a gun, except criminals and gun enthusiasts." The stranger shook his head in response. "A real shame, that kid. You can't be too cautious these days, especially around these." Suddenly, a jarring bump from behind the car interrupted his sentence. He swiftly turned his attention to the rear window, his eyebrows raised in curiosity. "Kid, if you wouldn't mind waiting here, I'll go check that out." As he exited the vehicle, my stomach churned with a growing sense of unease. I opted for a daring move, deciding to explore the glove box further. My fingers grazed over the pistol, but then stumbled upon a leather-bound book. Curiosity piqued. I retrieved it, only to discover it was a Bible. An eerie feeling washed over me, leading me to crack it open in the middle. Nestled within a carved-out section of paper lay a camping knife, its blade faintly tinged with red. I returned the book to its place as I heard the trunk close, and his footsteps approaching. He re-entered, visibly shaken. "What was that noise?" I inquired. The stranger sighed. "Seems we hit a rabbit. It was already a goner. Be nice in a stew, though." I found myself fixating on the oddity of his actions. Why collect a dead rabbit? And did the noise truly emanate from the trunk? But my suspicions remained unspoken as I mimicked his disappointed headshake. "Well," he declared, "no use dwelling on it. We still have a good hour of driving ahead." As we continued our journey, my mind raced, the unsettling questions I had about that noise, and what secrets this man might be concealing. I desperately formulated a plan to escape this ominous situation. The best idea I could muster was to feign a need for a restroom break and make a run for it while temporarily free. However, the thought of being chased through the woods by a knife-wielding psycho I couldn't fathom. I kept brainstorming, my thoughts landing on the gun tucked away in the glove box. My best hope seemed to be to somehow prove the stranger's intentions, before making any drastic moves. Finally, a plan began to take shape in my mind. I decided to lure the man out of the car by pretending to spot something on the side of the road. If he took the bait and left the vehicle, I could grab the gun and discreetly investigate the trunk, hoping it had a hatch accessible from inside. With no key in his possession for the trunk, it couldn't be locked. So, I put on my best act, pretending to be fixated on something by the roadside and said, "Is that a deceased deer?" The man glanced out of my window, and just as I had hoped, slowed the car down. "I wonder," he muttered. "Stay here, kid." With his attention diverted, I seized the opportunity. I opened the glove box and retrieved the pistol, then carefully and quietly swung the car door open, hoping to make as little noise as possible. The door released with a muted thump, but the stranger remained oblivious to my actions. I began tiptoeing around the side of the car, aiming to stay silent on the gravelly path. My phone was still in my pocket, and I knew I needed evidence to support my case. My plan was to take a quick picture. I glanced at the gun in my hand, switching off the safety as I continued my stealthy approach. Standing before the trunk, I extended my hand towards the handle. Suddenly, the crunch of dirt behind me startled me, and I whirled around. The man, shrouded in darkness, stood. His eyes gleamed at me with a murderous intensity. From his pocket, he retrieved a switchblade. "Didn't your mother ever warn you about poking your nose where it doesn't belong?" he taunted. He advanced towards me. "Why don't you return to the car, and we can forget about this and what you know of me being a killer?" My throat tightened as I placed my finger on the trigger and cautioned. "I never accused you of being a killer. Stay back. I have no idea what you're up to or what's inside that trunk, but you better keep your distance." He cracked his neck, a gesture akin to a seasoned fighter, and lunged toward me. I squeezed the trigger, and the pistol's muzzle erupted in a blinding flash. The man clutched his stomach, dropping his knife, and crumpled to the ground. He gasped, blood pooling around his lifeless body. I stared at him for what felt like an eternity. With a deep breath, I let the gun slip from my fingers, placing my other hand into the groove of the trunk handle. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, I finally opened the mysterious trunk. The lid creaked as it revealed its dark contents. To my astonishment, there, lying lifeless and innocent, was the body of a young girl. Her lifeless eyes stared up at me, forever frozen in their last moment of curiosity. What a sick man he must have been to do this to someone. In the trunk, I found a spade, likely used for the man's nefarious purposes. With a heavy heart, I dug 2 graves in a secluded spot nearby. The soil was unforgiving, but I was driven by a sense of not wanting the authorities to find out what I'd done. Then it occurred to me, many hours earlier, when my car had broken down. The strange man must have been disposing of the girl then, and when he noticed me, he must have decided to put off his plans till later. As I drove away from that grim sight, the weight of the night's events hung heavily on my conscience, and it was a stark reminder that the darkness could lurk in the most unexpected places.